Hello, everybody. All right, so welcome to the Mikestand. We've reached, of course, Hump Day, as many people know it. The middle of the week. As always, if you guys haven't already, if you guys can like and share the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything we talk about tonight grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I'll try to answer the questions. Um, as to the best of my ability. So, with all that being said, of course, we're going to give it a few minutes to. I'm going to give it a few minutes to give people a chance to come in. So. Let's see. Chilly Willy, it's Chilly Willy, chilly all the time. Let's see. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Guess who? So let's see. Yeah, we're coming up on let's see. Okay, once we get to 3 minutes, I'll go over what's on tap for tonight. Um, and we're coming up on that pretty quick here. All right, so here's what's on tap for tonight. So, as it does seem that it's been a bit of a slow news day in the world of niche, I decided to do a little profile piece tonight. So tonight we're going to look at the history of Walter Lantz Productions. Walter Lantz Productions was, of course, the company that gave us, of course, Woody Woodpecker, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, Chilly Willy, Andy Panda, the Berry Family, Hickory Dickory Dock, among others. Some of the well-known voice actors who worked there include, of course, Dawes Butler, Paul Frees, Dal McKinnon, and of course, the voice of Woody herself, Grace Stafford. So then, of course, after that, we'll of course do the wrestling wrap up, and then and from there we will be, of course, doing this day in each history. So with all that being said, now, as I said, if you haven't already, if you guys can help out by liking, sharing the stream, see if we can get some friendly people to engage, that'd be appreciated. Also, if anything grabs your attention from what we talk about, feel free to comment on or ask questions. With all that being said, why don't we go ahead and get started with our little profile piece tonight on Walter Lantz Productions. Alrighty then, so let's get into this. Alright, so Walter Lantz Productions was an American animation studio. It was in operation from 1928 to 1972 and was the principal supporter of animation for, or principal supplier for animation for Universal Pictures. Now, of course, we've talked about this before. Each of, now, of course, Warner Brothers, MGM, they would eventually have their own studio animate. They'd have their own animation cartoon studios um, already, but many of the others would contract out to other studios. In this particular case, of course, Universal contracted Walter Lantz Productions to provide their cartoons. The studio was originally formed as Universal Cartoon Studios on the initiative of Universal movie mogul Carl Laemmle, who was tired of the continuous company policies he was dealing with concerning contracting cartoons outside animation studios. Walter Lantz, who was Laemmle's part-time chauffeur and a veteran of John R. Bray Studios. John R. Bray, of course, I believe they were the ones who did a lot of the Out of the Inkwell cartoons, the silent cartoons before the advent of sound. Also, now 1928, that was 96 years ago as well. 1928 was the year Walter Lantz Productions was born. That was also the same year, of course, the first sound cartoon started coming out. Dinner Time was actually the first one, but for a long time it was believed Steamboat Willie, which came out that year as well, was. But anyways, with considerable experience in all elements of animation production, was selected to run the department. In 1935, the studio was severed from Universal and became Walter Lantz Studio under Lantz's direct control, and in 1939 renamed to Walter Lantz Productions. Lantz managed to gain the copyright for his characters. The cartoons continue to be distributed by Universal. So initially it started out as a Universal project, but then eventually Walter Lantz was able to kind of buy out the rights to it, as it were, it would seem. Let's see. The cartoons continue, distributed through 1947, changing to United Artists distribution in 1947 through 49, and by Universal again from 1950 to 72. Now there was kind of a year hiatus between 49 and 50. I think they had stopped for like a year or so, and then came back up. But the most prominent characters for the studio were Woody Woodpecker, Andy Panda, Chilly Willy, and Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. The music-oriented Swing Symphony cartoons were another successful staple, but ended after swing music's popularity faded after the end of World War II. Now, Grant, in the early days, a number of studios would have kind of like music themed kind of cartoon. And in fact, it's kind of funny because even though today we spell cartoon CARTOONS, Walter Lantz would actually spell it CARTUNE, implying the musical aspect. As many of you know, there have been many companies, of course, Merry Melodies probably being the more famous. Merry Melodies and Looney Tunes from Warner Brothers, but you also had Swing Symphonies here from Universal. You had Silly Symphonies from Disney, and then you had Happy Harmonies by Rudolph by Harmonizing. So let's see. So let's get into the history here then. Hey, Nicholas. Howdy, folks. Hey, Nicholas. Thanks for dropping in. If you haven't already, if you can like and share the screen, see if we can get some more friendly people in here. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, anyways, continue on here. 1928 to 1935, the opening years of Universal Cartoon Series. Also, of course, the you know, kind of the laying of the groundwork for what would become the golden age of animation here. So Lance began his career at the art department of William Randolph Hearst, New York American, during the 1910s, having his start in the cartoon industry at Hearst International Film Service, which in 1918 transferred its entire staff to Bray Productions. Now, as I mentioned earlier, of course, Bray Productions, I believe, was the company. They were produced at the time. At that time, were producing a lot more silent cartoons of the era. A lot of the out of the inkwell stuff. I believe so. By the mid 1920s, Lance was directing and acting in the studio's top cartoon, Dinky Doodle, also becoming a producer as Bray attempted to compete with Hal Roach and Mark Sennett by making live action comedies. Now, Hal Roach, I believe, that was the guy who created the Little Rascals. Yeah, Hal Roach Productions was responsible for giving us the Little Rascals. Talking about animation, I have a commission of my character by Don Bluth, Dragon's Lair name. Well, that sounds cool. Sounds cool there. All right, so we continue on here. Bray Productions closed shop in 1928, and Lance moved to Hollywood, trying to start a studio while trying to make a living in a succession of odd jobs, including driving Universal owner Carl Lemieux's limousine. The chauffeur job also landed Lance at Walter Lantz Studio, which produced cartoons for Universal. Early 1929, Universal was distributing the Oswald the Lucky Rabbit cartoons by Charles Mintz and George Winkler, created by Walt Disney. However, the popularity of the series was beginning to decline because the lower quality of the output. Lemieux then fired Mintz, and Winkler was now looking for someone to head an in-house animation studio. Lance won the studio in a poker bet with Lemieux. Okay, that's interesting. Poker bet. That's among probably some of the more unique wagers, I would say. Let's see. So, the first Lance produced Oswald cartoon was Race Riot, released on September 2nd, 1929. The first animation for the studio included Winkler veterans Roland Hamilton, Tom Palmer, and Rubber Hose pioneer Bill Nolan. Bert Fisk scored the first cartoons, scored meaning musical score, having done this for a few Winkler sound Oswalds. Additions to the staff included Pinto Colvig, who, of course, would later go on to provide the voice of Goofy for Disney, as well as being Bozo the Clown, and Fred Tex Avery. The earliest Lance cartoons from 1928 were built around set plots and stories. In the tradition of the earlier Disney and Winkler production shorts, conversion of Oswald cartoons into musicals was a different matter, but by mid 1930, Lance and his staff achieved this goal. In the process, however, Oswald's personality became less consistent. It could and did change drastically to fit a particular gag. Lance's musical directors changed as well. To replace David Bruckman, Lance brought in James Dietrich, a member of the Paul Whiteman Orchestra, making the jazz era sound of the 1920s a quintessential element in the early Lance cartoon. Now, mind you, remember, this is the very dawn of the sound cartoons. This is very early days of the sound cartoon. So, you probably did have a lot of changeover because, again, like comics of the same era, you didn't know where this medium was going to go. You had no idea. It was still a pretty, early. This medium, the medium of cartoons was still pretty early at this state. So, of course, there was a lot of, turnover, as it were. Anyways, moving on to, as we continue on with the article here, let's see now. Where were we? Oh, yeah. All right. He remained as the permanent studio musical director until 1937. Lance and Nolan worked in a character called Fanny the Mule for a 13 cartoon series announced by LeMille in early 1930. These cartoons were never produced. In 1931, Lance faced economic difficulties and was forced to make cutbacks, shortening. Now, again, this was during the Depression era too, so and was forced to make cutbacks, shortening the lengths of his films and post-synchronizing a handful of early Disney Oswald's cartoons. Another way out of the hole was to gain attention by creating a secondary series of shorts featuring a new star, Pooch the Pup. Lance and Nolan would now divide the studio into two separate units. Lance would direct the Pooch cartoons, while Nolan would work on the Oswalds. So now they had two characters they were focusing on, Oswald and Pooch the Pup. With both series referencing the dire straits of the Depression, Pooch never became very popular, and the series was dropped in 1933. The following year, Nolan left the studio, and the Cartoon Classics series of Technicolor shorts began lasting for a year. And you notice again how they spell cartoon there, Cartune, which was to kind of emphasize the musical side of the medium there. All right. So as I said, if you guys haven't already, you guys can like and share the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people in here. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I will try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. Anyways, let's see now. So as we continue on with the article here, let's continue on with this. 1935 to 1940, the decline of Oswald and arrival of new characters. All right, so control of Universal by Carl Emile and his family was slipping away because of financial difficulties and came to an end in 1936. John Cheever Cowden became Universal's new president. With the change in management, Lance seized the opportunity as Universal for permission to make his studio independent. Universal agreed. And on November 16th, 1935, Lance broke off and claimed the studio for his own, even though it remained on the Universal lot. So basically, seeing the writing on the wall in the midst of the Depression, seeing that, with the change in management there, they decided to decided to make it, he decided to become an independent studio. He would still, of course, distribute his cartoons for Universal, but now, Universal didn't have to deal with some of the overhead or what have you of running it. He could run it. It gave Walter Lantz more freedom, obviously, and it gave them, still having the chance to still get the cartoons, but without maybe having to be as directly involved. So it was a good thing for everybody. During the mid to late 1930s, Oswald's popularity declined, and Lantz experimented with other characters to replace him. After a succession of failed attempts, the 1939 Life Begins for Andy Panda became an instant hit, and Andy Panda became a successful substitute for Oswald, who was retired in 1938. Lantz also switched to all-color production in 1939, shortly before Andy's debut. So Andy Panda, had become another big character for Walter Lantz, throughout the 40s. So it was Oswald and Andy, and then Woody Woodpecker, and then Chilly Willy. In 1940, the Walter Lantz studio was in trouble. Universal, once again, was facing severe financial difficulties and possible bankruptcy, and decided to cut their weekly advance to the now independent Lantz studio. This left Lantz scrambling for alternative sources for funds. Forcing him to shut down the studio for a while, Lantz was able to gain the rights to the characters of his films, including Oswald the Lucky Rabbit and an Andy Panda cartoon. Crazy House was developed into Lantz's first fully independent film. Lantz used the film as a final appeal to heads of Universal, and in the end was able to reach a satisfactory settlement with them. By autumn 1940, Lantz's studio was back in business again. The year also marked the debut of Lantz's biggest star, Woody Woodpecker, who debuted in the Andy Panda cartoon Knock Knock. All right, so before we continue on, I do need to step away from the computer for a moment, so I'll be right back. But what I will do, of course, I'll put some music on to entertain you guys while I'm gone. You guys can think about what we've read thus far, and I'll be right back. am back. So why don't we go ahead and just as a friendly reminder, of course, you guys can like and share the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So with all that being said, let's continue on with the article here, or with the history here. So 1940 to 1947, swing symphonies and a guess who, in quotes there. Now, for those of you who just came in, just as another quick little reminder, of course, tonight we're going over the history of Walter Land Productions. For those of you who came in late, didn't know or don't know what we're doing here, so now you know. So, anyways, Woody quickly became extremely popular, um, being given his own series in early 1941, and became one of the most famous examples of the quote unquote brash bird cartoon characters of the late 1930s, early 1940s, such as Donald Duck from Walt Disney, the success of Scrub Me Mama with a Boogie Beat and Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy, the former becoming subject to controversy and even protest soon after its release over racial stereotypes. Also led to introduction of the Swing Symphony series that fall. As I mentioned earlier, of course, um, many of the studios had kind of a musical cartoon series as part. Walter Lantz had Swing Symphonies. Warner Brothers with, of course, Merry Melodies and Looney Tunes. Um, Disney with Silly Symphonies, Happy Harmonies from Harmonizing and MGM. So you kind of get the thing there. So often featuring popular musicians of the time, the series ended in 1945 at the twilight of the big band era. After the studio's 1930s cartoons were scored by a succession of composers, including James Dietrich, Victor Records producer Nat Shilkret, and harmonizing veterans Frank Marsalis and Daryl Kalker, took over in 1940. Kalker's arrangements became noted for the distinctive swing flavor. After Disney's success with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the Lantz studio planned to make a feature, Aladdin and His Lamp, featuring the ascendant comedy duo of Abbott and Costello, but after Mr. Bug Goes to Town failed at the box office, Aladdin never made it to the actual production. Late in the decade, Lantz attempted to do a feature-length cartoon again, but it never came to fruition. Basically feature-length meaning, because obviously these shorts were, shorts of this time, of course, were about 7 minutes long. So, anyways. Anyways, getting back to the article here. Let's see. All right. 1947 to 1949, United Artists and first close down. So in 1947, Lance renegotiated his 7-year Universal contract with Matty Fox, the new vice president of Universal. The deal was interrupted when new ownership transformed the company into Universal International and did away with most of Universal's company policies. The new management insisted on getting licensing and merchandising rights to Lance's characters. Lance refused and withdrew from the parent company by 1947, releasing 12 cartoons independently through United Artists during 1947 and early 1949. The cartoons from this period stand out for their slicker animation compared to the previous Universal releases, mostly because of the influence of director and Disney veteran Dick Lundy. Yes, Dick Lundy was a big contributor throughout the 40s and 50s for Walter Lance. I've seen a number of his credits when I've watched Tune In With Me on MeTV. So, as well as the addition of Disney veterans such as Ed Love, the era also marked the end of Andy Panda cartoons. Popularity was waning. Um, let's see. Um, Under the deal with United Artists, Lance was supposed to receive percentages of box office receipts to pay for the production cost of his cartoons. UA, however, attributed a tiny portion of the dollar amounts to Lance's shorts from the features. This was because UA was at the time a struggling studio attempting to reestablish the position in the industry it had in the 1920s. The result was that Lance exceeded his standing loan of $250,000 from Bank of America. He had left Irving Trust in 1942. At the recommendation of BAC President Joe Rosenberg, Lance decided to shut down his studio temporarily at the end of 1949 until the loan was reduced. He asked Universal to reissue his older films during the hiatus, a request accepted by Universal President Nate Blumberg. In the interim, Lance made a series of film ads for Coca-Cola and introduced quote-unquote the Woody Woodpecker song as a theme song for the character. He also went to Europe to look for studios that could animate his films there, approaching government incentives not found stateside and lower labor costs. However, the post-war economic situation of these countries, as well as the presence of stronger unions than in Hollywood, led him to back out and keep making films in America. And I think MGM would try this years later as well. And I think it was the 60s when they would do some of their production over in Czechoslovakia and Gene Deitch. That was, of course, MGM, not Walter Lance here. But anyways, 1950 to 1967, revival and venture to television. In 1950, the Walter Lance Studios opened its doors once again. The first effort the studio produced was a brief sequence featuring Woody Woodpecker for the George Powell feature Destination Moon, released on June 27th the same year. Lance then renegotiated with Universal for 7 cartoons to be released the following year, provided that they all feature Woody Woodpecker. Lance and his crew immediately set to work on the new batch of shorts. 2 of these new films, Pony Express and Sleep Happy, were previously storyboarded by Ben Hardaway and Heck Allen during the United Artists period. In 1951, the new cartoons were finally released and became instant hits with audiences. They were so successful that Universal commissioned 6 more shorts for the following year. Overall, 1951 marked the beginning of a new era for Walter Lantz production. Now, also in the 40s, there, of course, Woody Woodpecker's voice was done by a few, like his first year there, 1940-41. I think for the his first 3 appearances were done by Mel Blanc, and then a number of different voice actors would do his voice. Ben Hardaway being one of them. And so Ben Hardaway, aside from being a storyboard artist, one of the voices of Woody Woodpecker. But we'll probably see here, Grace Stafford would eventually become Woody's voice from 1950 on. During the mid-50s, the film industry was suffering and losing money, meaning lower budgets for cartoons. By 1956, there were only 7 animation producers in the short subjects business. And by the end of the decade, that number had dwindled to 3. Walter Lantz and his distributor, Universal Pictures, knew that the only way to subsidize the rising cost of new shorts was to release their product to television. Which would have, well, okay. Oh, they're gonna say it. Okay, so we'll get to that in a moment here. Norman Gluck from Universal Short Subjects Department made a deal with the Leo Burnett Agency to release some older Lantz product on television. Burnett handled the Kellogg's Kellogg's cereal account, and Lantz soon met with the Kellogg's people to sign the contract. At first, Lantz was not very eager. He admitted that he was only working in the medium because he was, quote, forced into TV, unquote, and, quote, cartoons for theaters would soon be extinct, unquote. The Woody Woodpecker Show debuted on ABC on the afternoon of October 3rd, 1957, and lasted until September 1958. So in essence, 1 year. The series was seen once a week on Thursday afternoons, replacing the first half hour of the shortened Mickey Mouse Club. Lantz integrated his existing cartoons with new live-action footage. So basically, the Woody Woodpecker Show became a compilation show. Much like if for those who grew up in the 80s, like I did, you'd see a number of them, like many of the studios did that. You know, you had Looney Tunes Merry Melodies from Warner Brothers would be doing like, you know, compilation shows, MGM with Tom and Jerry, you know, see a number of those. And even Disney did it as well. Let's see. An updated look that satisfied both viewers and Lantz himself. Live action and animation. In fact, I think they're using the opening from the Woody Woodpecker Show for MeTV's Woody Woodpecker Show now. So that was kind of the live action animation segment created for the show, called, quote, A Moment with Walter Lantz, unquote, featured an informative look at how the animation process for his, quote unquote, cartoons, again, notice how he spells it with Cartunes, worked, and how the writers came up with the stories and characters. The live action segments were directed by Jack Hanna, who was fresh from the Disney studio, where he had done similar live action animation sequences for the Disney show. Walter Lantz, of course, was nicknamed over the years the Other Walt. All right, so let's see. 1967 to 72, final years. By 1969, other film studios had discontinued their animation departments. leaving Walter Lantz as one of only two producers still making cartoons for theaters. The other studio was the upstart DePatie Frayling Enterprises. DePatie Frayling, of course, the company that gave us like Pink Panther shorts, The Inspector, or The Ant and the Aardvark, Roland and Rat Fink, working for Lance's former contractor, United Artists. From 1967 to the studio's closure in 1972, Universal distributed the Lance cartoons as packages, and theaters would play them in no particular order. Lance finally closed up the studio in 1972. He later explained that by then it was economically impossible to continue producing them and stay in business, as rising inflation had strained his profits, and Universal serviced the remaining demand with reissues of his older cartoons. So, and understand where Walter Lantz was at this point. So, Walter Lantz, who is, of course, married to Grace Stafford, who was the voice of Woody from 1950 to 72. Walter Lantz was born in 1899. Grace Stafford was born in 1903. So, when Walter decided to close down Walter Lantz Productions in 72, he was already 73 years old. And I believe Grace was like 66 going on 67. So they were already at the point when they were probably ready to retire anyways, right? It just made sense. So anyways, continue on with the article here. Bye Bye Blackboard, a Woody Woodpecker cartoon, was part of the final slate of cartoons made at the Walter Lantz studio. 13 were completed for 1972, one with Chilly Willy, 4 starring the Barry family, and that's a pretty good one. Barry family with, of course, Paul Frees providing the voice of Charlie and Junior Barry, and Grace Stafford, Woody's voice, providing the voice of Bessie Barry there. And the rest with Lance star character Woody Woodpecker. So of the 13, you had 8 Woody Woodpecker cartoons that year. Upon discovering that it would take a decade for his shorts to show a profit, Lance himself decided to shut down company operations and threw a farewell luncheon with the staff at the announcement on March 10th the same year, with him handing Woody watches to them. Okay. The legacy of Walter Lantz Studios. Let's take a look at this. See where are we at here. 43 minutes. So not bad on the time in terms of how we did this. Okay. Legacy. Unlike other American major animation studios, the Lantz Studio never continued full-time during the classic period of American animation, closing down in 1949 and appearing and reopening its doors 2 years later. It was finally shut down permanently in 1972 after the end of the golden age of American. So even though the golden age of animation had already been therefore ended, they lasted even beyond that, even though it was not continuously. They closed down for a year, then came back. So since then, the studio's characters have continued to be used in syndicated television series and licensed merchandise. Lantz reissued 6 of the 1931-32 Disney Oswald cartoons, including Trolley Troubles, Great Guns, and The Ocean Hop. Throughout the studio's history, it maintained a reputation as an animation house of medium quality. Lantz's animated shorts, dubbed cartoons, were considered superior to Terrytoons and Famous Studios. Now, mind you, Terrytoons was the company, of course, that gave us Mighty Mouse and Heckle and Jekyll, and they were, of course, their company was headed up by Paul Terry. They would contract to 20th Century Fox, And Famous Studios, they were the company that of course, they had the rights to Popeye during that period, as well as Casper the Friendly Ghost, um, Little Audrey, Herman, Catnip, Baby Huey, all that. The Harvey tunes, basically. But they never gained the artistic acclaim of Walt Disney Productions, Warner Brothers Cartoons, MGM Cartoons, Fleischer Studios, or UPA. Now, Fleischer Studios, of course, was bought out by Famous. Fleischer, of course, we had the black and white Popeyes, as well as the Superman cartoons of 41, 42, and Betty Boop, and UPA. However, now UPA, I believe, was Mr. Magoo, Gerald McBoing Boing. However, the studio benefited from getting talent from the other studios who were tired of the management there. Usually found the Lance studio a more enjoyable working environment. Tex Avery was just one of the many talents Walter Lance Productions benefited from on the rebound. Tex Avery, having worked, of course, for MGM, he was major. One of the guys who would be, I think, directing and producing the Tom and Jerry cartoons at one point. In 1984, Lance sold everything outright to MCA Incorporated. He painted landscapes in retirement and still lifes of his cartoon characters. He died in 1994. So that was a couple of years after his wife Grace passed away. Grace Stafford. In February 2006, NBC Universal, who still owns the Lance Library, sold the trademark rights to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, along with the copyrights to the original 26 cartoons produced by Walt Disney to the Walt Disney Company. The sale was part of a deal that centered around both the rights to Oswald and NBC's acquisition of the rights to the NFL's weekly Sunday night game in exchange for NBC Universal selling the rights to Oswald to Disney. Al Michaels was freed his contractual obligations with ESPN and ABC so he could join NBC and become the Sunday Night Football play-by-play man. In July 2007, Universal Pictures released the Woody Woodpecker and Friends Classic Cartoon Collection, a 3-disc DVD box set compilation of Lance cartoons. A second volume was released in April 2008, followed by a vanilla release in 2009. Woody Woodpecker Favorites, which contained no new to DVD material. Animation historian Jack Beck, partly involved in the production of the DVD releases, has stated that plans for further volumes are currently on hold. Let's see. So, let's see if anybody's saying anything here. No. All right. In 2008, Illumination, an animation production company founded by Chris Meledandri, made a deal with Universal Pictures, which positioned Illumination as NBC Universal's family entertainment arm that would produce 1 or 2 films a year starting in 2010. Like Walter Lance Productions, Illumination retains creative control and Universal exclusively distributes the film. So some of the names that have been involved as part of the Walter Lance production staff over, in the time frame from 1920 to 1950. Of course, Walter Lance was the producer. Directors included Walter Lance, Bill Nolan, Tex Avery, Alex Lovey, Ben Hardaway, Emery Hawkins, James Culhane, Dick Lundy, Paul J. Smith, who worked with the company from 1953 to 1972, Ray Patterson, Jack Hanna, who worked from 60 to 62, and Sid Marcus, who worked from 63 to 66. Some of the storyboard artists and writers for the company included Walter Lance, Homer Brightman, Ted Pierce, who of course had also worked for Warner Brothers for a while there. Dick Kinney, Cal Howard, Sid Marcus, Dale Hale. Music was done, of course, by Frank Marsalis, Daryl Kalker, 1949, 164, Clarence Wheeler, Walter Green did from 62 to 72. Um, and also, as you know, as a reminder, of course, some of the voice acting talents there would include Mel Blanc early on in Woody's voicing career, Dawes Butler, um, Paul Frees, Dal McKinnon, and of course Grace Stafford, who was the voice of Woody and would also provide the voice for a number of female characters for Walter Land productions, including, of course, Bessie Berry of the Berry family, Ma, I believe, from the Ma and Pa series. So among some of the famous film series shorts would include Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, as we talked quite a bit about, Pooch the Pup, cartoon classics. Um, let's see, Woody Woodpecker, which I believe looks like the most shorts produced, 196. Swing Symphony, the Coca-Cola commercials, Mom Paws we talked about. Chili Willie had 50 shorts produced by them. Sugarfoot had a couple of Sugarfoot, of course, was a part of the was basically was kind of a spin-off of Mom and Pa, but also ended up being featured in some Woody Woodpecker shorts. Maggie and Sam, Spectre Willoughby with 12 shorts. Windy and Breezy, Hickory Dickory and Dock, and the Berry family, as we talked about. So there we go. There we go. So with that, now that we're done with that, let's go ahead and get into the wrestling wrap up a bit here. As of course, so we're going to talk a little bit about of course, some of the latest news in WWE, AEW, and we do have to report on a passing as well. So first off, in WWE news, there's been some major shakeups for planned for WrestleMania. Now it's being rumored that it's possible Gunther will be challenging for the World Heavyweight title, taking on Seth Rollins. Now they're pushing a possible match between Cody Rhodes and CM Punk, which will not allow Cody to finish his story finish his story, as it were, with Roman Reigns. As they're also pushing for the possibility of a Rock versus Roman Reigns matchup. So that's all we got for in terms of the WWE. Well, actually, one other piece of news. So, as reported yesterday, of course, Kevin Patrick was basically taken off of SmackDown, and it now, for the short term, would seem he'll be replaced in the short term by Michael Cole until they can find a more permanent replacement. And again, we do have to report. We have a passing to report, as it was reported by Diamond Dallas Page on social media yesterday that Harold Hogue, better known to most fans as Ice Cream from his time in WCW, 2 stints in WCW, one half of the Fire and Ice tag team with Scott Norton, among other things, passed away at the age of 57 yesterday. So Ice Train, WCW's Ice Train, Harold Hogue, passed away at the age of 57. So let's go ahead and do a quick moment of silence for him, for his passing, and then we'll continue on with more the wrestling wrap up here. All right. So with that, now tonight's Dynamite, as we talked about, has some interesting matchups set up for tonight. As Hangman Adam Page will be oh, it was also recently announced that AEW will be that the ranking system in AEW will be returning now. So wins and championships are going to be very important here. They're going to be pushing more the sports side of the sports entertainment aspect. On tonight's show, of course, we have Hangman Adam Page taking on Penta El Zero Miedo, both of which are coming in undefeated thus far in the singles competition. Page 2-0, Penta 1-0. You also have a battle of factions here. Wardlow with the Undisputed Kingdom his corner, taking on Trent Beretta with Chaos in his corner. So Trent Beretta taking on Wardlow. Trent Beretta has, of course, Chuck Taylor, Orange International Champion, Orange Cassidy, and Rocky Romero in his corner, taking on Wardlow, who will have the Undisputed Kingdom of Adam Cole, Roderick Strong, and the Ring of Honor World Tag Team Champions, Mike Bennett and Matt Taven. Thunder Rosa will be taking on Red Velvet. The AEW World Trios titles will be defended as Billy Gunn and the Acclaimed will be defending the titles against the Mogul Embassy, Brian Cage, Bishop Khan, and Toa Leona, coming off of their loss of the Ring of Honor World Six Men. And in a open match, Adam Copeland takes on Minoru Suzuki. So that's all we got in terms of the wrestling wrap-up. So now, with all that being said, now let's start to wind down, as today being Wednesday, January 24th, 2024. Let's take a look back at this day in each history. History! So let me just review. 99, 2004, and 2009. Okay. So without no further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at this day in each history. So first off, we head back 50 years ago today, as on this date, 50 years ago today, the 280th issue of Tom and Jerry, which was a series that went through a couple of companies and a few titles, went on sale on this date back in 1974. So for 20 cents for 32 pages. The series started out, of course, as Argane for Dell Comics, then became Argane with Tom and Jerry, and then Tom and Jerry Funhouse, and then Tom and Jerry. So on this date, the 280th issue of this series, Tom and Jerry, went on sale on this date back in 1974, 50 years ago today. So with that, we'll go getting ready to move on to now we move ahead to 1999. On this date in 1999, WWE held its Royal Rumble event from the Arrowhead Pond in Anaheim. The night saw the Big Boss Man defeat Road Dogg in the opening match. Ken Shamrock retained the Intercontinental Championship over Billy Gunn. X-Pac retained the European Championship over Gangrel. Sable retained the Women's Championship over Luna in a strap match. Strap match, of course, similar to chain match or bull rope match. Basically, two competitors tie together. You have to incapacitate your opponent to where you can touch all four corners, dragging them around. That's how that all works out there. Let's see. The Rock defeated Mankind in an I Quit match to become the new WWF champion. And Mr. McMahon won the Royal Rumble, last eliminating Stone Cold Steve Austin. McMahon of course, came in number 2 right after Austin. And they both lasted 56 minutes 38 seconds. So, with that, so there you go. It was 25 years ago today that the Royal Rumble happened from the Arrowhead Pond in Anaheim. Moving ahead to 2004. On this date in 2004, Cinepix's Cubics Robots for Everyone finished its run on 4Kids TV. So on this date in 2004, which was 20 years ago today, Cinepix's Cubics Robots for Everyone, which was produced in Korea, finished its English language run on 4Kids on this date, 2004. So, with that, let's get ready to. And finally, moving ahead to 2009. On this date in 2009, Studio Dean's OVA Hitalia Axis Powers, or ONA rather, the original net animation for Hitalia Axis Powers, premiered on this date in 2009. So with that, I thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. So anyways, I hope everybody enjoyed the show. Tomorrow night, hopefully we'll be back with more news. As I told you, it just seemed like kind of a slow day, and of course I don't even know yet because as of before the show, Chris Braley had not put up anything new for Indie Comic Showcase. I don't know if he done one this week or just is getting it up late. So if there is an Indie Comic Showcase article, we'll go over that tomorrow. If not, we'll be back to the niche news and all that. We will have some story. And of course, if it's another slow news day, we'll probably find something to talk about, as I always do. And of course, on Friday, RJ Carter from Critical Blast will be joining me as we'll be taking a look back through comics history, going over book comics that went on sale in January 1940. This week, focusing in, of course, on Fox Feature Syndicate. We'll be focusing in on Science Comics Volume 1, Issue 1, as well as going over briefly Blue Beetle Volume 1, Number 1, just giving an acknowledgement of that. So with that, I thank everybody for being here. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. And I will see you all back here tomorrow. Bye.